Morning, Glory America. Bonjour. Hi, candidate to Hewitt on November the 4th. 4 days until we vote. I'm live inside the Beltway. Good morning to you. I hope you're doing great. I was at a belated Navy birthday last night and was up late listening to two great speeches on the United States Navy, so I hope I'm not too ragged on the voice department. As you know, I love to talk to Democrats on this show. My favorite speeches are when the Washington Speaker Bureau sends Paul Begala and I out on the road, or Jonathan Carpot and I out on the road to kick around the issues. Well, yesterday on Twitter, Democrat State Representative Steve Woodrow took exception to one of my tweets that quoted a Wall Street Journal poll. So I engaged him and said, hey, come on, let's talk about what it's like to be a Democrat on a red wave year, in a red wave year on the ballot. And he very charmingly agreed. He's a smart guy. He's from Michigan. We'll overlook that. He went to the University of Michigan. We'll overlook that as well, as I did for law school. He's a very successful lawyer, and he represents a district in Denver. Good morning, Representative Woodrow. I'm glad to have you on the Hugh Hewitt Show. How are you?
Good morning, Hugh. Thanks so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Now, let's GPS this for the audience. Where is your district? I know it's a Denver district. Where is it exactly? Because we're on KNUS.
Yeah, for sure. So it's 4:06 a.m. here in not yet sunny Denver. I represent southeast and central Denver, some of the sort of funnest neighborhoods, Wash Park, and those types of areas.
And so what's the DR split? Is it a pretty Democratic district?
It's a deep blue district. There's no question about it. Denver itself is deep blue. My district within Denver is deep blue. It's a pretty safe seat, but we take nothing for granted. I think Hillary Clinton showed us in 2016 there's no such thing as a firewall here. You got to get out there. You got to talk to voters. And that's why I'm really grateful for the opportunity of you letting me on this morning. I know that your listeners and folks like myself, we don't usually get to connect with one another. So I am appreciative of that opportunity.
I love it. I love it. And Secretary Clinton's been here. Secretary Kerry's been here. I have Democrats all the time. Senator Coons, Senator Murphy. I love talking to Democrats. It's civil. It's pointed. I mean, we don't beat around the bush. But you're my first time guest, the first time for you to be on the Hugh Hewitt Show. So I got to ask you the four obligatory opening questions. All right, Stephen? Do you go by Steve or Stephen?
Either. I mean,
all right.
My wife's listening, say Stephen, but otherwise,
I'll call you Representative Woodrow, too, because I respect the office. Number one, have you read The Looming Tower, Representative Woodrow?
I have not had an opportunity to read it cover to cover just yet. I'll get on that.
Okay. Was Alger Hiss a communist spy?
That's one of your obligatory questions?
Yes.
Let me go back and look at the history books. I haven't read up on Alger Hiss.
I knew it. A University of Michigan graduate would not know the answer. Oh, dear God. My alma mater. He's a communist spy. Okay, key one. How many times has Michigan beaten Ohio State in the last 20 years?
I don't know the last 20 years. I do know that last year we won, but that you guys have totally crushed us, in terms of the greatest sports rivalry over the last decade. I'm obviously a huge Wolverine fan. And last year was great.
So you just kind of blank out the other 18 out of 20 times that the Wolverines have lost? Is that how you cope?
No, I want to be perfectly honest with you. You guys have gotten the better end of that rivalry for the better part of 2 decades since I got out of school in 2002.
Yeah. I left the campus in 1983, and at that time it was kind of an even match thing. But yeah, it's been bad. All right, let me get to some. By the way, I want to be careful. What are your pronouns?
He, him. I'm fine with both teams being undefeated going into that final game. I think it makes it so exciting every year. So I am hoping that this year is the same and we have a really good rivalry game.
It will be. It always is. But we're going to crush it. But I digress. Do you have pronoun preferences? I want to respect them.
Oh, I said it before. You can call me he, him.
Okay, him. I didn't hear it.
How about yours? Are they he, him?
I'm just Hugh. Everybody just calls me Hugh. Or Dwayne, my producer, calls me Dummy. That goes a long way. And what the fetching Mrs. Hewitt calls me, we can't say on the air. Let's go to politics. How do you think President Biden is doing?
I think he's done a good job, and I think that he gets an unfair shake on programs like this. I mean, he's passed the American Recovery Act, transportation, infrastructure. We have a minimum tax now on the world's largest corporations. We've got a 1% tax on stock buybacks. Insulin is capped. Out-of-pocket drug costs for seniors are capped. I mean, I think this guy has done a lot better job. I understand that, folks disagree, and inflation's high, and people are hurting. But inflation's global. And United States inflation, it actually lags behind the rest of the world. So I think that the president's done a good job. Obviously, it's not perfect, but it's good government. And without, having to state the obvious, it's light years better than what we had under the last guy.
All right.
And
So
I
how
want
would
you
you
to
grade the
listen.
president? Is he getting a B? Is he getting an A?
I would give him a B plus. He's not gotten an A yet. He needs the Democratic Congress. People forget that FDR had 70 Democratic senators when he was able to get, his tremendous progressive agenda through. President Biden has had 50, right? And he says, give me 2 more. And I believe that with 2 more United States senators, we can get a lot more done for the American people. Now, look, if your view of the world is that you don't want insulin cost capped, if you don't want prescription drug prices capped, if you don't want the government negotiating any prescription drug prices, if you don't want infrastructure, then vote against the Democrats. But if you want these things, and if you know they're good for the country, then you should be on Team Blue. And look, I get it. History tells us that these are tough years. Midterms are tough years for the party in power. You know that. That's why you keep saying it's a red wave year. I don't think we're going to see a red wave necessarily. I certainly don't think it's going to hit the shores of Colorado. We have a great ground game here in Colorado. We work our tails off talking to voters, going door to door, letting them know what's on the line.
And I want my audience to know it's an interview with a Democrat, not a debate with a Democrat. So I'm not going back and forth. I'm not jumping on the Representative Woodrow whenever he says something, because it's an interview, and I appreciate his coming on, because being a Democrat on any ballot makes you a little bit nervous this year. But Representative Woodrow is doing a good job covering up. His hands are shaking. I think he's had a coffee. But let me go to this. Do you have any concerns about President Biden's age?
Oh, this reminds me of the famous Reagan line. He doesn't want to insult any, his opponent's youth and experience. I think that the president's age isn't an issue. I would like to see younger members of my party start to take the reins. I think that we have a great crop of young, talented people, and that, in this day and age, it's just set up so the more entrenched you are, the more easy it is for you to stick around. On both sides, we have senators and representatives on both sides of the aisle who've been there way too long. We have term limits here in Colorado. I am term limited, and I think that's a good thing. I don't think I should be in this position forever. I don't think, my folks put me in a deep blue district and, basically set it and forget it. I think that it's important that folks like myself understand that this is temporary and that we're here to get as much good things done for people as possible.
So do you want President Biden to run for re-election?
At this point, I would say yes. I think it would be fine if he ran for re-election. If something were to happen with his health, over the next several months, I would probably want him to re-examine that. I mean, let's cut to the chase right now here. President Biden could resign tomorrow, and Kamala Harris would become the first Black woman president in history. Correct?
Halloween's over,
right? But that could happen. Right, and so
but again, let's not go there. I mean, I'm scared enough as it is, but
that wouldn't bother me. I understand that it would scare you, but I think the point is that, I mean, if he wanted to do something like step aside and let someone else, assume that role, he could do that at any time.
All right, let me go back to that's right. You don't have any age concerns, but they might develop. I think that's fair. Do you favor the president's student loan forgiveness?
I do. That's a really tough one to set the needle right. But, I went to school in a day and age when people came out with $100,000 in debt. Now kids are coming out with $200,000 in debt, even more when they want to go to grad school. It is an unbelievable burden. The president's plan isn't perfect, but it does forgive all the student loans for about 20 million people. And that's incredible. That is a yoke that's going to be taken off.
I came out of law school with student loan debt. I don't know if you came out of the U or Chicago Kent Law School with student loan debt. I paid it off. Do you think this is fair either to people like me, and I assume you, who have paid off student loans, or to parents who have just finished paying for their kids' tuition? Do you think it's fair?
Yeah, I do. I paid off most of my student loans. I paid off my wife's student loans. This is definitely more than a 6-figure bill, and I worked hard. And it's not like I don't make a lot of money doing what I do. I've been very fortunate and blessed. I'm not going to qualify for student loan forgiveness, but I've received so many other advantages that someone else getting something, no, it's not unfair to me. It wasn't unfair to me when there was a trade war and farmers were provided billions in bailouts. I supported that because they were the subject of policies that had hurt them for a period of time. And
Okay,
so,
so
them getting that money, someone else getting something good is not necessarily unfair just because you didn't get the same thing. When you really
okay,
take a look inward, you
I
probably got
I
some.
appreciate clarity in the answers, but also brevity since there are a lot of them. Do you support fracking?
No, I don't. I don't support fracking. I don't think that hydraulic fracturing is good for the environment. I think
Do you
that the
believe
conservatives I know care very much about our land, air, and soil, Hugh, and our water, and they know what fracking is doing.
do you believe John Fetterman when he says he supports fracking?
I haven't taken a look at John Fetterman's stance on fracking. I think that he's been pretty maligned, in the press, especially the right-wing press. I think he's a good candidate. I think he's much better than the TV doctor who complains about crudité prices. But I leave that to the people of Pennsylvania.
But he does say he supports fracking, so you disagree with. I don't. He used to be where you were, but now I'm for fracking.
Sure,
You,
we're a big tent, Hugh. We have room for people who have serious
ooh,
disagreements on energy policy.
it's just that there are heads on pikes outside of the tent opening. That's all I worry about. Let me ask you about.
Well, that was Steve Bannon heads on pipes.
That was actually Kathy Griffin was the first one. Do you favor the? Let me put it this way: is Denver police sufficiently funded?
Yes, I believe that we just provided additional funds for policing here in Colorado. I know that defund the police is a slogan, and it caught on, and it sent a message to folks that I think there was some confusion about. Literally, no one has stripped police budgets down to their winnow, so police can't do their job. I want police to feel respected, and I want them to be part of the community. That includes community involvement and buy-in, and I don't think that there's been enough of that.
And so the defund the police movement, which was not embraced by all Democrats but was embraced by some Democrats, has got no part of Stephen Woodrow's legislative agenda.
Stephen Woodrow is a police reformer. He is not a defunder, as that term is commonly understood.
What's that mean?
Well, when you say defund the police, people.
No, I mean, what does police reformer mean?
Oh, well, I voted for our landmark police reform bill here in Colorado. We got rid of qualified immunity, the judicial judge-made doctrine that said that if a police officer violated your rights in a way that hadn't exactly been done before, that the police officer couldn't be held accountable. And we got rid of that here in Colorado, and that's important. People need to know that their law enforcement is going to follow the law too.
So when it comes to just putting a knot on it, how is crime in Denver?
Like everywhere in the country, it's increased. The determinants of crime, the social determinants of crime, we have increasing poverty, people who fell out of work during the pandemic, and crime increased. That happened all over the country, but we've done a pretty good job of trying to get it under wraps. We have high statistics when it comes to things like catalytic converter theft because we have one of the world's largest airports. If you were to take that out, Denver's crime rates fall back in line with national.
Yeah, Denver's got an extraordinary car theft rate, but generally the rise in crime that has marked most major cities, run by Democrats primarily, you attribute to the COVID shutdown?
No, I attribute it to the economic issues that stem from the pandemic that we're still struggling from. Most things have rebounded, but I think you know as well as I do that inflation's still a problem. Supply chain issues are still out there. We have people, looking for work, finding work, not being satisfied with the wages that they're getting paid, and having an issue trying to make ends meet. People are struggling. Your listeners know 60% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. That is a tremendous amount of pressure on folks. And no one's excusing crime. No one. But at the same time, I think most people know in the year 2022, you have to look at the underlying root causes as opposed to just saying, these are criminals, lock them all up.
Do you support no cash bail?
I do. I do support no cash bail because it means that if I commit a crime and you commit a crime, and yet a poor person commits the same crime, you and I can leave that day because we can afford the bail, whereas that poor person oftentimes cannot.
Yeah, no, again, to my audience, it's an interview, not a debate. So I'm not debating Representative Woodrow. I'm just asking the question. Let's go to abortion. Abortion is legal in Colorado at all stages of pregnancy. Do you support any restrictions on abortion that would limit it in the final weeks or months of pregnancy?
I think you Colorado voters have repeatedly weighed in on this. It's gone to the ballot multiple times in the last 20 years, and they every time have come back and said, keep the government out of this. The idea, I think it came out of Pennsylvania, that a local government official should weigh in on the decision of whether or not someone should have an abortion is just silly. No,
actually, Dr. Oz was talking about state houses, and the state. I don't know if the Constitution of Denver constitutionalizes, of Colorado constitutionalizes abortion rights as it does in Colorado and California. But you yourself, I'm not asking about the people of California. You, Steve Woodrow, do you support any limits on abortion at all?
No, keep the government out. We just passed. You asked if it's statutory or constitutional in Colorado. We're going to be trying to get it into the Constitution. But last session, we passed the Reproductive Health Equity Act, which keeps the government out. It says that it's a decision between a doctor and a patient. When someone needs an abortion at the moment of delivery here, that is a terrible situation for that person to be. That means that they've already got a name picked out. That means something terribly wrong has happened. And to say that, nope, the government's going to rush in at that moment and put its heavy hand in, I think most people can agree that it's wrong. And most people know that a national abortion ban is not where we should head. And most people are pretty ticked off about the reversal of them.
Have you heard of Kermit Gosnell?
Of course, and Dr. Gosnell is in prison for murder.
Right.
Because he was a murderer. Because he murdered people after they were born.
He also, but he also didn't do late-term abortions because the health or life of the mother was at risk. He did it for their convenience, and you have no problem with that. Those that were not postpartum murders, 7th, 8th, 9th month abortion, you're okay with that?
Yeah, he's in prison.
No, but I'm asking you, are you okay with 7th, 8th, and 9th month abortion where the life of the mother is not in danger?
Yes, it's not my decision to make.
Okay.
It's not your decision, it's not my decision, their decision.
I just wanted clarity. Are you familiar with Masterpiece Cake Shop and 303 Creative? You're a good lawyer. I looked up your lawyer, and you got lawyering cred. You're very good at this. You're
Masterpiece Cake Shop. Yeah. I think Jesus bakes the cake, Hugh. I think Jesus says, love is love. Love your neighbor. Love the stranger. Love the foreigner. Bakes the cake. And if it's discrimination, it's discrimination. You're going to have to pay a penalty for that if you refuse.
So Jack Phillips should be shut down?
I don't think that you can refuse services in public accommodation because you disagree with how someone lives their life.
Okay, and 303 Creative, are you familiar with 303 Creative?
I haven't dove into 303.
It's a website designer who, like Jack Phillips, Lori does not want to design same-sex marriage websites, so she serves LGBT customers all the time, just like Jack does. He just doesn't want to decorate cakes celebrating same-sex weddings. They're both exercising their free speech. And, did you had con law, right? Who taught you con law?
Yeah, I studied con law. We had that at Chicago Kent.
Right. So you know what coerced speech is. So they're being coerced by the state to deliver messages that they don't want to deliver, and you're okay with that?
Well, look, I get the argument. There's no question about it, and I know we're not arguing with each other, but I do totally understand where people come from on this. At the same time, that's the rationale that was used to deny accommodations to, couples of mixed race, when they would come try to get a hotel back in the day. It was, no, I don't rent to people like you. And that's not something that we should condone here. I think. All right,
so I'm telling people, again, it's for the benefit of the audience. I'm not debating, Stephen. I'm just listening to the answers. Otherwise, we'd have a debate about that, but it's because it's got nothing to do with public accommodation law. But let's just move on. Which guns would you confiscate from their already lawful owners?
I wouldn't confiscate any guns. I encourage gun buyback programs, and I support a nationwide assault weapons ban. Between 1994 and 2004, when we had an assault weapons ban, we had one mass shooting in the United States where 10 or more people died. It was in my state. It was Columbine. It was 20 minutes south of where I live today. Right? Since the assault weapons ban expired in 2004, since 2005 and today, we've had 18 mass shootings where at least 10 people have died. So what was a once in a 10-year span occurrence is now occurring more than once a year. We've become numb to it. We've become accustomed to it. The NRA, while you and I talk about this stuff, the NRA has flooded our streets with approximately 400 million firearms. It's a problem. It's gotten
the NRA did that?
Well, they certainly, are in cahoots with gun manufacturers and lobby Congress hard to make sure that there's very few restrictions on guns coming into the country and being produced.
Would you leave people who have AR-15s, for example, semi-automatic AR-15s, would you leave them alone and not go get their guns? Because Beto O'Rourke wants to go get their guns.
Yeah, hey, look, I'm not a confiscator. I mean,
okay.
We have to have a serious discussion at how to tackle that issue. Gun buybacks have been tried other places. It is going to be difficult when there's 400 million guns around. That's true. It's going to be a really tough thing. But at the same time, the idea that a good guy with a gun stops a bad guy with a gun is nonsense. It was proved false in Uvalde, Texas. How many more good guys with guns could have stayed outside that school as those kids called 911 crying for help? What we need is fewer guns. And I don't begrudge those police officers not wanting to face these assault weapons. That they're insane. The firepower and what they do to someone's body. You talk to an ER doc who's had to operate on some of these folks. So
I want to give you a chance to explain. You don't begrudge those officers not going into the room?
Yeah, I don't. I think that, yes, their job is to run in. At the same time, we are asking our officers to face firepower that officers in other countries do not have to face. Officers in Great Britain don't have to face this stuff.
Get it? I get it. Just wanted clarity, Representative. I want to move on. Did schools in Denver, which are, right there for you, did they close the right amount of time during COVID, for too long or not long enough?
Oh, that's a question for history, Hugh. I don't know if we're ever going to figure out the right answer on that.
That's a question for state legislators like you, Representative Woodrow. Did they stay too long or not long enough, or the right amount? Were they Goldilocks in Denver?
I'd probably say the right amount. My kids were remote learning. Obviously, it was a strain on families and on parents. My wife did an amazing job making sure both of our boys stayed on top of it, and we were fortunate enough to have someone home who could do that. Going back to school is super important. At the same time, we have to recall the amount of misinformation that was being pushed, especially in right-wing circles, about the virus, calling it a pandemic, saying it was no bigger than the flu, saying it was a hoax, saying ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine were the answers. All that misinformation led people to not get vaccinated, let people go out and not take it seriously, and that increased community spread. The places that did their best with kids going back to school had low community spread. The places that didn't do a great job sending their kids back to school had higher community spread. So I think, yes, it is a question for a state legislature, but, we're going to have to debate it over the course of many years looking back. Time will tell.
Are you raising your two boys to be Wolverines fans?
Absolutely, Hugh.
Oh, that's sad. Are you raising them to be Lions or Broncos fans?
Broncos, and get this, my oldest, just to spite me, is a diehard Packer fan.
Well, that's okay. They're kind of Canada's team, so maybe he's going back to his roots. Back to issues. Do your boys play sports?
They do. When I started running for office, I wasn't able to coach anymore, but the oldest one loves flag football. That's the big sport out here. It's not t-ball or soccer. It's really flag football. And being a coach was just the greatest. I mean, I would actually get butterflies before the game. But, seeing kids work hard, focus, work as a team, that's just the best.
All right. Now, should boys who identify as girls, trans girls, be allowed to play girls' high school sports?
Yes. And I think that it's a strange issue that it takes up so much time on the airwaves, that we spend so much time talking about women's sports. And I think the reason is because if we're talking about women's sports, we're not talking about the offshoring the job. We're not talking about the people who sent jobs overseas or cut taxes for the wealthy by $2 trillion. We're not talking about January 6th and the big lie. We're focused on something that literally does not impact 98% of Americans' day-to-day living. It is an important issue for the people who play those sports, there's no doubt, and I appreciate everyone's view on it, but I ultimately think that the American people want to know more about what are people like me doing to, help them in their day to day. What are you doing to make sure?
I get you. I'm just running down the issues, but I just want clarity. So you are in support of transsexual girls in high school being able to play girls' sports and dress, I assume, in girls' locker rooms.
The locker room issue I have to look a little more into. To the extent that it's a real problem, we can dive into it.
Why do we have to look into that? If you're in favor of them playing in the sports, why not play and let them into the locker room?
I don't know what the current situation is. I don't know everything. I have to look and see what locker rooms are currently allowed in.
All right. What's the highest marginal rate that Congress should adopt in the tax bracket?
Oh, wow. Back in the 1950s and 60s, we had a 70 to 90% rate on the top earners. I do think that's too high. I think President Kennedy was right to lower it. I think, you're probably looking at a fair top marginal tax rate of around 39.6. But, we need to do more to tax billionaires.
You're right on the number. It's 39.6. So how high would you set?
Those folks don't. But that's the thing, is when you go to tax billionaires who get paid on carried interest and other things and capital gains, their tax rate is different.
So let's just take an ordinary $100 million guy who's making, let's take your governor, Jared Polis. How much should he pay in income taxes after the 39.6? How much of that marginal dollar should they pay?
Yeah, I'm fine at 39.6, but I want to make sure that the other stuff that I literally just said, the loopholes that the wealthy use. And Governor Polis is a pretty wealthy guy. He knows what he needs to do in order to pay, the taxes that he wants to pay. And so, when you're dealing with the ultra wealthy, you have to look at how they get their income and tax that.
In the most recent piece of legislation passed by the Democrats on a partisan vote and signed by the president, they funded the hiring of 87,000 new IRS employees. Was that a good idea?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a litany of very wealthy tax cheats who have been able to employ armies of lawyers and tax accountants, tax attorneys and accountants over the years to hide and obfuscate their earnings and what they do. The former guy is no exception. And it's going to take resources in order to go get those folks to pay what they ought to be paying. When I say let's raise taxes on the wealthy, one of the things I commonly hear back from folks is, you can't. They're too smart. They figure their way out of it. And now we say, okay, well, let's give our IRS the resources to actually prosecute those things. And the blowback is, oh, no, you're going to go after mom and pop. I don't think that's the intention.
All right. Is the sage grouse in Colorado actually endangered?
I need to read up on the sage grouse population. Apologies. You
All
really are going through the issue.
Well, no, I'm just running. I like to, I get an elected Democrat. I just like the audience to hear what Democrats believe. You wrote to the Denver.
You know what we believe? That's a good question. We believe in the American dream, Hugh, and I know you.
All right, wait. Let's not do rhetoric. Let's do issues. Let's do it because time is limited.
But this is an issue. This is the key issue. And your listeners should know this, because this is how Dems really feel. The American dream, folks. If you work hard and play by the rules, you ought to be able to do better than your parents did. And I don't think Democrats like me do a decent enough job talking to your audience about hard work. Okay? You got to work hard. This is America. You want to get ahead, you got to roll up your sleeves and get gritty and really work hard. And Democrats do believe in that if you work hard, play by the rules, you should be able to do better than your parents did. That's the American dream. It's generational advancement. And we believe in that. And I know you believe in that. I think we have different views on how we get there.
Do you believe in affirmative action such as discussed at the Supreme Court on Monday?
Yes, I do. I think it would be a mistake to overturn Betts versus Bollinger.
All right. So we disagree on that. But again, it's not a debate. It's an interview. What is the you told the Denver Post your priority is climate change in the next session. What would you want to legislate that's not already on the books in Colorado?
Yeah, we have a lot of work to do, from air quality to our regulatory oversight, our recycling programs and processes. We pride ourselves on being a pretty green state out here, yet our recycling is, I think, half of Minnesota. I mean, that's a shock when I tell most voters. because they think that when they put their stuff in the recycling bin that it's all going to, go through the process in the system. And so we have to improve on that. I think that's a bipartisan issue, or it's at least becoming more of a bipartisan issue.
Do you support more nuclear power plants?
It has to be an option. It's on the table. I mean, if we're looking at alternative energy sources and we can do nuclear right, I'm not completely dead set against it. I think closing our minds to ideas is silly. We have to go with what works. And if there are scientists and trained engineers and professionals who come and say this is how it's done, and here's a proven track record of how we could do it, then I think we owe it to ourselves to listen and not just be dismissive.
Why do we have record inflation, Representative Woodrow?
Yeah, inflation is a global problem. We have supply chain disruptions. We have a global pandemic that we're coming out of. We have serious consolidation of gigantic corporations who are now able to set price. I have a real problem with folks like Robert Reich when he says, inflation, they're price gouging, but he won't say the next part, and he started to, which is we need DOJ antitrust enforcement. If a company has the power to set price, they're too big. They're a monopoly. They've gained too much market share. And I know it was great for efficiency purposes that we let all these companies gobble each other up and become behemoths over the last 20 years, but there are negative externalities to that. One of them is antitrust violations.
But I'm back on inflation. What is the cause? We've had big companies up through 2020, and we had the shutdown beginning in 2020 and the election in 2020. Why is there inflation now, and there wasn't inflation at the time President Biden took office?
Well, we still have supply chain disruption issues. We still do have a global pandemic, even though most people have moved on from it, sort of psychologically speaking. And we have companies using inflation as a cover to price gouge. That's what I'm talking about when I say they're setting price. They're gouging.
You're putting inflation at supply chain disruption. Is that the only thing?
I literally just said it's also price gouging.
Okay, well, price gouging and, okay, I've got two. I'm like the Spanish Inquisition on Monty Python. Three things. I want to know three.
Look, I will say that if you want to just pin it all on runaway government spending, that's not reality. I mean, yes, government spending has an impact on inflation. So do tax cuts for the wealthy. So no, I don't think that the inflation that we're dealing with right now is a result of the president's spending agenda.
Okay,
that it's
good.
A result of
good.
I heard it's a global phenomenon, and
okay.
Inflation in the U.S. lags behind the rest.
Important question. What is the most significant accomplishment of Senator Michael Bennet?
Michael Bennet has helped raise more kids out of poverty than any other senator I can almost think of. And he also introduced Medicare X, which allows the government to negotiate prescription drug prices. So he's been very influential in getting those policy positions actually passed into law. He gets a knock from the conservative press here in Colorado that he supposedly hasn't done anything, and I just disagree with that.
Would you expand on that? Because I don't know of anything that Senator Bennett's done. So tell me what he's done.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about child tax credits. We're talking about, I just said Medicare X. That was the original idea to allow the government to start negotiating prescription drug prices, and we just got that in to the last bill.
And you credit Senator Bennet with that?
He was the one pushing it early on.
Okay, just wanted to check. What's the most significant accomplishment of Governor Polis?
Governor Polis has helped repeal the death penalty. Governor Polis has helped ensure abortion access. Governor Polis has passed $5 billion in transportation infrastructure spending. Governor Polis has allocated $1 billion to affordable housing, which is a crisis here in Colorado, and mental health supports, which is another crisis here in Colorado. Governor Polis has kept good on his pledge for full-day kindergarten and to start universal preschool. He's done a great job. There's a reason Governor Polis is the highest polling member of government here in Colorado. He's done a great job for Colorado.
Is the border secure? Vice President Harris has said it is twice.
Is the border secure? I think that we have a desperate need in this country for comprehensive immigration reform. I am an attorney, as you pointed out. I've represented someone who was trying
I
to keep.
believe the judge would order direct you to answer the question. Is the border
Yeah, I said I think
secure?
we have a problem. I said I think we have a problem. Is it secure or insecure? I think that's almost a red herring. What we have is we have a problem where folks can try to legally come to this country. And look, I filed their paperwork for them. It took 5 years for Immigration Services to provide us a written response to her application. When you have that kind of backlog, talking about what's happening at the border, scaring and fear mongering about migrant caravans, chanting, getting crowds to chant, build a wall. Look, scapegoating immigrants is something you do when you can't defend your record. You tell them that drugs are coming in, crime's coming in, and it's all because of these folks. It's not because we've gutted public education. It's not because your health care is super expensive. It's not because we offshored your jobs. It's not because we keep cutting taxes for the wealthy and promising it's going to one day trickle down to you. Nope. Those immigrants are the problem.
So my question remains: would you change anything about policy at the border? At the border,
Yeah,
just in border security.
it's not a state issue for in Colorado. If I was part of the federal government and Congress, God forbid, I would definitely be part of the conversations on immigration reform and seeing what happens at the border. That's obviously part of the conversation.
Okay, you voted no on making possession of fentanyl a felony. You explained that to the Denver Post. Would you tell the audience why you voted no on making fentanyl possession a felony?
Yeah, so we have a fentanyl law on the books. Its possession was a misdemeanor, and there was an effort to refelonize it because it used to be a felony. And the way it was written makes it so any amount of fentanyl on any unlawful substance weighing over a gram is now a felony. So if you have a gram of, let's say, cocaine, and there's a sprinkled detectable amount of fentanyl on it, because maybe it was in a bag with fentanyl, that's a felony possession of cocaine. And I am very hesitant and very wary about giving government more power when it comes to policing. I am. I think that when we have more crimes on the books in this type of way, prosecutors are able to overcharge. And that's what I don't want to see.
We're running low on time. I just got three more. You
Okay.
also cited to the Denver Post you spent $750 million or helped direct $750 million in federal funds to address homelessness and incentivize the building and retention of affordable housing stock. How did you so spend the $750 million to decrease the homeless problem in Denver?
Yeah, so great question. This was part of a process, a bipartisan process, where we established something called the Affordable Housing Transformational Task Force. Heard from experts who basically told us, look, we need tax incentives, we need grant programs, we need loans, create these opportunities for us, and we will leverage those dollars, and we will give grants to local communities, we give grants to nonprofits, loans to these same organizations, and have them on the ground facilitating the building of more affordable housing units and the maintenance of those units to keep them affordable. And
do you think we can build our way out of this problem? I'm actually fairly familiar with this. Served Great Heart for the Homeless, served on a commission, took care of them for a long time. Talked to the judge trying to take control of the situation in Los Angeles where there's 70,000 people living on the street. Denver is not the same level, but it costs the city of county of LA $800,000 per unit of affordable housing. Do you think we can actually build our way with affordable housing out of the homeless crisis?
Build alone? No, but build we must, because we don't have enough units that are affordable to house people. And our costs out here are, thank goodness, they're not $800,000 per unit. I think they're more than $250,000 to $300,000, which is still very high, especially given inflation. But we have a supply problem. We did not, I'm sure as you're aware, Colorado saw a large increase in population over the last 20 years. We have not kept pace building.
If you look into it, I think you'll find the sage grouse has a lot to do with that. Let me conclude, though, because you've been very cooperative.
You're hilarious.
You don't know about the sage grouse, do you?
I mean, a little bit, but I mean.
That's why you don't have a lot of homes being built in a lot of parts of Colorado. I was an endangered species lawyer for 30 years before I hung up my active practice of bar, and so I know the species Colorado profile pretty closely. Let me close with this, and you've been a good sport, Representative Woodrow. Yesterday, you objected to my quoting a Wall Street Journal story. That it was just a quote about a Wall Street Journal poll, and you said it's a nonsensical poll, and he's amplifying the misinformation. And then you called me a Limbaugh wannabe. Look, I don't mind. I've been called lots worse than that. I kind of admired Rush for opening the mall. I just have a storefront in it. But what is misinformation about quoting a Wall Street Journal story about a Wall Street Journal poll?
Sure, I appreciate the question. The poll was done of what, 150 women, and I think you hashtagged it Red Wave. I mean, look, I get it. I get it. You're a diehard conservative. I appreciate that about you. Democrats like me need to engage more, frankly, with conservatives like yourself. So I appreciate this. But come on. I mean, if I were to post, Blue Wave when a survey shows 150 people said something, I mean, you're talking about subgroups, one or two answers accounted for that sway. And so to amplify that message, look, you have.
I just want a rule. I really am just looking for a rule because the New York Times Siena poll had 4 polls based on 600 people in each of the 4 states. It said Fetterman was up 6 points and Mark Kelly is up 6 points. Those are laughable. And I thought the sample size was ridiculous. But the Wall Street Journal poll is done by serious people, and they did it month over month. It's cross-tabbing tracking is a very difficult thing to do, but I just quoted the poll. I just don't see how that's misinformation, and I regret the use of the word misinformation because it seems to me we need one rule on what is or isn't. When you quote the Wall Street Journal, it's like quoting the New York Times, isn't it?
Look, I hear what you're saying. 600 as a sample size. Most statisticians will tell you that a simple random sample of 400 is all you need to survey the entire country, but 150 one is not a simple random sample. I think it does not do a service to your audience.
So you reserve the right to label as misinformation that which you don't want to deal with, but it's
that I think is misinforming people. Look, I also want to be clear on something. I think that in tone and demeanor and appearance, you are obviously far more kind and less cruel than Rush Limbaugh. I do think that the Limbaugh legacy lives on. I think the cruelty we saw this week with the reaction to the attack on the speaker's husband is echoes of Rush Limbaugh.
Now I got to stop because Rush did me a number of good turns. Did you listen? Rush was an entertainer who was maybe the most successful communicator, along with Oprah, over a sustained period of time, building an audience of 20 million daily. And he did so largely on humor and good grace. He didn't do interviews like I do, and he was very candid about that. It wasn't an interview show, so he just did a different shtick. But I think he was certainly far less cruel than Trevor Noah and far less cruel than Stephen Colbert. But I just want to know what your rule is on cruelty, because if humor is cruelty, okay, it's one rule. But do you hold up anyone on the left to the same kind of criticism you just delivered at Rush?
No, I don't think that there's an analog on the left to Rush. And I think that if you want to say Trevor Noah and Stephen Colbert are as cruel as Rush Limbaugh, then that's a headline too. I mean, come on. You really feel that way?
I think they're both. I think they both do things I wouldn't do. But I did like
Chelsea Clinton. I mean, was
again. It's an interview, not a debate. You have a particular animus to Rush. You tweeted, "I want to be a Rush Limbaugh wannabe." So I want to know what you mean by that.
Yeah, I think the things that you and Rush have in common is that, and I mean this respectfully, I do think that you both spent a lot of time telling your audience that they're victims of an LGBTQ agenda.
Wait. How much do you listen to my show?
I have. And
so you think I tell people they're victim of an LGBTQ agenda when my guest host is Guy Benson?
Hold on. You're an interview show. You bring on people and you give them a platform to do this. You had the former guy on and you said, look, I disagree with you about the election, but I agree with you about so much more, with all the banality of a conversation about like what fries are better, McDonald's or Burger King. I mean, that was an insurrection, Hugh. I know you care more about that. I know
January 6th was a riot at the Capitol, and everyone should be arrested and sent to jail. And President Biden won the election on the morning after it was over. And I just don't, I've disagreed with the former president often about that. He knows that. I know that. But let's close on this. Do you really believe democracy is in danger?
Yes, absolutely. We just had an attempt. They threatened to hang Vice President Pence. He had to call Dan Quayle and ask if, am I allowed to disregard electors? And thank goodness the former vice president of all people, Dan Quayle, said, no, Mike, You're not allowed to do
I
that.
get the January 6th
That's
narrative,
how
but
far.
do you think there's a danger to democracy right now? Like in Colorado, do you think there's a danger to democracy in Colorado?
There's a danger to them. Well, no, in Colorado, we have a Secretary of State who's done a great job protecting our elections. But when you have the big lie, you've got the My Pillow guy continuing to spread it.
Look again. These Mike Lindell. I've known him a long time. I don't agree with him on anything, but these are cliches. I want to know what you think the threat to democracy is.
This is a threat to democracy.
But I mean, what is it?
Try to take an election and lie about it, and then lie about lying about it, and then what about it, and say, oh, but Dems burn down cities, Russia, Russia, Russia.
Well, no, again, you're not answering my question, and we're running out of time. My question is, what is the threat to democracy? People use that. They say it's a crisis to democracy. Yeah. I'm just curious, what do you think is going to happen that's a threat to democracy? I mean, the 800 rioters are all arrested. They've gone to jail, and that's good. But do you expect a riot at Colorado State House?
No, not in Colorado, but we do.
Do you expect it in?
It would not shock us. It would not
in Florida.
It would not shock us to see conservatives reject election results that they don't agree with,
like Hillary in 2016 and Al Gore in 2000.
Pardon?
Al Gore in 2000 and Hillary Clinton in 2016 encouraged objections. They also encouraged objections on verification day. They both
conceded. They both conceded the race, Hugh. You know that.
I know that, but they also. What about the Democrats who stood up in Congress in 2000 and 2004 and 2016 who did the same thing that Republicans did in 2020? Not the rioters, but the legislators. Why are those two things not the same?
They're not the same because they're not based on lies. They're not based on nonsense.
Wait.
I will say that it's different. There is a difference, and I think that you would agree with this, in feeling when you win a popular vote and lose an election. Al Gore got 500,000 more votes than George W. Bush. Hillary Clinton got 2.7 million more votes. So the idea that there might be some anger and resentment and bitterness, look, I marched with people wearing pink hats. Okay, I understand what it's like to be upset when an election is lost. I get it. But the idea that you say that it was stolen, and you keep saying it was stolen, you declare it 1776.
Counselor, I'm going to go back to the key question here, because in 2000, 2004, 2016, and 2020, we had members of Congress object to the electoral ballots as cast in the states. That happened 4 times. One of those times had a riot.
Did any senators in those years?
I don't know. I think they did, but I don't know. I don't know.
Of course they did.
Wait,
of course they did.
But what about the House members did, right? The House members did.
But that's the difference. But a House member doing it without Senate support is spitting into the wind.
So you knew the result would not work. So the theater was okay for Democrats.
Hugh, they almost overthrew the election.
No, they did. You don't believe that, Representative.
Yes, I absolutely do. And had they done it, we'd all be sitting here today talking about how, well, the Democrats should have done more to stop it. As opposed to saying, no, these guys lied. And
I want to close by this and give you distinguish for me the members of the House who objected in 2000, 2004, and 2016 from those in the House who did so in 2020.
Yeah, I know. I believe it's a false equivalence. I think that
that's a conclusion, not an argument. What distinguishes them?
I understand. I think that there's a difference. I think everyone knows there's a difference.
What is the difference? Just articulate it for me.
The difference is that a handful of Dems objecting orally, knowing that nothing's going to come of it, is very different than Republicans making a concerted effort with the backing of the current president to overturn the election results and have a senator on board to make it a valid objection. That's why
I think you should read.
When he raised his fist, it was so awful. And you know that, Hugh.
I just asked questions. It's not a debate, but I wanted to make sure. But now I go back to the most important thing you missed up on, so I just want to give you a chance to correct it. Was Alger Hiss a communist spy?
It sounds like he was. You say he was, so I guess I got to go back and look.
You really don't know?
I don't study Alger Hiss. I mean, my guess is yes, that he probably was. There's probably been a lot of communist spies in our country At the
I'm
same
just
time,
I
McCarthy.
always go to that only as a placeholder for whether or not people took history as an undergrad. What did you major in at the University of Michigan? Were you in a frat? Were you an SAE guy? Is what was going on?
I was in Delta Sigma Phi.
Oh, that explains it. No history there.
Yeah,
All right. Hey,
yeah, and I was a poli sci major.
at Michigan, you poor man.
Yeah, poli
But you're
sci.
a very good lawyer. I mean, you're part of the plaintiffs bar. You're doing well. And what's your specialty? I gather consumer litigation.
Yeah, I sue banks, financial institutions, telemarketers, debt collectors, and corporate landlords. I
Yeah.
represent consumers who get the short end, and I know your listeners know what I mean by this. They've been overcharged by huge companies like Verizon and the rest of them, and they call customer service, and they have to go through a phone tree for 45 minutes just to get kicked off before they can talk to a person. I represent folks like that. I take on corporate America. Not saying corporations are evil, not saying that they're all bad, but I do think that the little guy has gotten, played for the past several years, and that's what I do.
All right. Hey, Steve, great talking to you, Representative Woodrow. Come back again. I just wanted to talk to a Democrat looking at a red wave who's putting on a brave face, and you've got the bravest of faces.
Hey, Hugh, we both respect Teddy Roosevelt, the man in the arena, right?
Amen. And you're in there, and I just sit in the studio and throw stones. But I am glad you came on, and I appreciate. It's very early, and now you have a deposition, right?
Yeah, I got a lot of work to do today. I'm glad you got me up early. Now I'm going to go to it.
All right. Thank you, Representative Woodrow. Come back after the red wave. We'll talk some more.
All right, go blue.
The book, which is a bestseller, and people's eyebrows have arched up in the middle of a campaign, Only the Strong. How is a serious argument being made about national security in the middle of an argument? And while inflation rages, the crime wave crescendos, the border is open. No one is talking about China except you and me. Why should we be talking about China? Why have you spent so much time in Only the Strong talking about China, Tom Cotton?
Well, here in many places I've campaigned over the last month, there is actually a conversation about China because Americans recognize that China is not just a threat to our safety and freedom and independence, but it's a threat to our prosperity. So many Americans have lost their jobs to China. So many industries and businesses have been cheated by China. China is the number one threat the United States faces. It's probably, in many ways, a more dangerous threat than Soviet Russia was because of our economic entanglement with China. It was a terrible mistake, a terrible, historic strategic mistake to aid China's rise. China was and has been, since 1949, a communist nation. And simply because they began to apply market principles in aid of their own development to build their own national power, we should never have been duped in the 1990s and the 2000s that China's rise was somehow going to be peaceful and beneficial for America. If you look carefully, you could see the signs of how China itself repudiated that idea. But certainly by the time Barack Obama took office, we should have been under no illusion that China viewed itself in a competition with America. And now Joe Biden still won't even say that we're in some kind of Cold War with China. Now, he may not want that. He refused to say in the 1980s we're in a Cold War with Soviet Russia as well. But you don't really get to make that choice. If a nation like China is waging a Cold War against you, threatening your interests, undermining your friends, stealing from your workers, from your businesses, costing jobs, costing trillions of dollars of economic growth here in America, the only choice you have is to win or to lose.
Now, Senator, you are on the Intelligence Committee and the Judiciary Committee. So you're in a position to talk to Christopher Wray in two forums. Last week, he announced that they are opening a new counterintelligence investigation against a Chinese agent in the United States every single day. The breadth and scope and depth of the China challenge to subvert and undermine American interests and to spy on us is so overwhelming. I don't know if we can recover from this. And Only the Strong, you allude to it. What do you do as a Republican majority? Nothing's going to get done, by the way, if we elect Democrats. Nothing at all. They don't seem to care about this. But do you think Wray and the gang can get on top of this?
Well, I think we should be spending a lot more of the FBI's time and resources focused on Chinese espionage and less on so-called threats to democracy or other fleeting fears of the Democratic Party they see behind every door. The FBI should not be used as the enforcement arm of Joe Biden's Democratic Party. It should be used to protect Americans. And one key threat is Chinese espionage. I mean, as you say, Hugh, it's pervasive. We have in Arkansas cases, judicial cases, where Chinese nationals or American citizens have been charged with stealing valuable technology that we could use here for our own prosperity as opposed to letting it be taken back to China. So although the FBI has a lot of dedicated agents who are working on the China threat, we really need even more, and we need to be more clear-eyed about how pervasive that threat is. Even when it's not espionage, China has a vast influence operation in the United States. I mean, look at the way LeBron James responded when the Houston Rockets general manager showed some support for Hong Kong protesters. Look at Disney sucking up to the Chinese provincial government that's responsible for enslaving religious and ethnic minorities in China. It's pervasive throughout the media, Hollywood, Silicon Valley, universities and colleges, lobbies in Washington, and it needs to be exposed so the American people realize the extent of the threat that China poses.
Last question for this segment on China, Senator. People have to read Only the Strong if they want to get the full scope of it. There will be a next president. That next president will be dealing with President Xi, who's dictator for life. There will be a first conversation between our next president and President Xi. What do you want our next president to say in that first conversation with Xi?
Well, he needs to make clear that there's going to be a major correction from the Biden era and the Obama era, that we're no longer going to allow China to exploit our workers and our businesses. We're not going to allow them to threaten our friends in the Western Pacific, like Japan and South Korea and Taiwan, and that under no circumstances will we stand by if Xi Jinping tries to go for the jugular in Taiwan. That should be said publicly. Unlike Joe Biden, it shouldn't be walked back by anonymous aides afterwards. But then actions speak louder than words. That next president has to take emergency action to ensure that Taiwan can fortify itself and it can do to China what Ukraine, with American and Western help, has been able to do to Russia, which is defend its own territory and fight its own war against a large, dangerous neighbor.
We'll come back. One more conversation with Senator Cotton about Only the Strong. Don't miss it. Senator Tom Cotton, his book, Only the Strong, I hope you've enjoyed. I know you've enjoyed the conversations with him, but I've only skimmed along the surface of Only the Strong. You have to read Only the Strong if you're going to enjoy Only the Strong. Senator, I left at the end one question. Do you think a serious argument will work? Abraham Lincoln went to Cooper Union and he tried to make a serious argument about why slavery was never the intention of the framers, why it could not be extended to territory. It was a long speech. It was electrified. It made his presidency viable. It made him a candidate. It was a serious argument, but it was a serious time and people used to read. Do you think serious arguments work in an era of Twitter and MSNBC?
Yeah, I do, Hugh. For the record, I think Abraham Lincoln would also have been great on Twitter and on social media because he was so pithy and witty. I mean, remember, the Gettysburg Address could probably fit in a few tweets. But we've been down this road before. In the years after Vietnam and the Jimmy Carter presidency, many of the fears that Americans have today, they had then as well. Not all of this history gets into Only the Strong, but I read deeply about that era and about Ronald Reagan and how rapidly he turned America around. So by winning this election on Tuesday, and then by winning again in 2024, and having a new president with new Secretary of Defense and a new Secretary of State, committed leaders who believe in America, who are proud of our country and its heritage, and hopeful and optimistic about our future, then we can turn it around, as I explained in Only the Strong. And that's what the American people want. It's what they expect and they deserve. They deserve leaders who attend to their interests, who ensure their safety and their freedom and their prosperity, who don't apologize for America, who don't undermine the sources of American power. If one makes that argument, I think the American people will receive it very well.
Senator Cotton, in Alexander Solzhenitsyn's memoir, The Oak and the Calf, he said, what if it's only paper mache? He was referring to the then Soviet Union. He was referring to the superpower that no one thought would ever fall when it came out probably in the early 80s. Oak and the Calf. What if it's all paper mache? What if it will melt in the rain? Do you think we can actually pull this off again? I know you hope we can, but do you really think a second Reagan can arrive and a second renewal following catastrophic foreign policy failure can occur?
I absolutely do, Hugh. I draw upon Reagan's wisdom a lot in Only the Strong because he drew upon the founders' wisdom. Their foreign policy looks different because of different circumstances and ages, but at root, it still was based in pride about our nation and understanding the way the world works and a dedication to our safety and our freedom and our prosperity. The American people still want that. I also draw a lot upon Winston Churchill as well.
Yes.
And he had a nice line I said about the character of our people. We did not journey all this way. We did not come across the ages, cross the oceans, and cross the mountains and the plains because we're made of sugar candy. The American people are not made of sugar candy. They are not paper mache. Many people have met their demise over the last 250 years by underestimating the American people. And I would caution any of our adversaries, Joe Biden's weakness or Barack Obama's ideological weakness is not the weakness of the American people.
Senator Tom Cotton, thank you. Congratulations on Only the Strong, available at Amazon, bookstores everywhere. Make sure you get it in the hands of everyone and vote like your life depended on it next Tuesday, because as Senator Cotton explains in Only the Strong, indeed it does. Thank you, Senator.